Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville, and I'm delighted to host this week's guest of my Kibbitzing with Kagan conversation, Diane Vu, the head of Montgomery County's Office of Community Partnerships. Diane has headed up Montgomery County's census effort for the last 10 million years and put in more hours and more energy than you can shake a stick at. So I'm looking forward to a conversation with her. Diane, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for asking me to be here today.
Of course. So why don't you start, for those who may not know, what is the census and why is it so important that we get counted every 10 years?
Yeah, so the census is a count of everyone living in the United States, and it's important for several reasons. One, it brings state and federal funding to local jurisdictions. So in the state of Maryland, for every person that was counted, it's estimated that we receive a little over $18,000. So a family of four will bring in almost $100,000 for a family of four. And those dollars go towards schools, school lunches, roads, hospitals. So it's really important that we get a full and accurate count of everyone who lives in each one of our jurisdictions. Additionally, it's important for representation. The count determines how many people represent us in the House of Representatives. So it's very important that we get a full and accurate count there because our representatives make very important decisions on things like immigration policy, right? So again, a full and accurate count is critical to that. And third, some of the things that people don't talk about is the data piece, right? So for a lot of undercounted communities and underrepresented communities, we make determinations on where grocery stores go, where schools go based on how many people are in that community. So we have to make sure that all of our communities responded to the census.
So talking about data and talking about immigrants, and Montgomery County has such a richly diverse population. Talk about, if you would, the privacy issues and some of the concerns that some of our newer residents might have as to immigration and enforcement and using that data for ill.
Yeah, so in Montgomery County, 1 in 3 of our residents are foreign born. And particularly under this political climate, a lot of our folks, whether they were foreign born or not, were really concerned about sharing their data because of all of the stunts that this administration tried to pull. And so our message to folks was to reiterate the fact that the census data is protected by Title 13 of the Constitution, which is the strongest protection that is in the books. And census workers and the census is not allowed to share any type of personal data for 70 plus years. And otherwise it comes with a fine of up to $500,000 or 5 years in jail. So the protection piece was very important for us to stress that their data was not going to be shared outside of census purposes.
Do you think people believed you with the that this White House has been pulling? Like, how much cynicism was there?
Oh, I mean, a lot, right? But yeah, I mean, luckily it seemed like our messaging worked, right? Because we had a self-response rate of 78%, which was almost 2 percentage points above where we were in 2010. So that is, if that's not a clear indication of how important it was for our communities to stand up and be counted, like I don't know what better data point there is out there, right?
Right.
And so we also work through our trusted partners like faith communities and nonprofit organizations. I mean, that was really the key for us getting communities counted, is to work through the trusted messengers in the community.
Right. So I have to say, so as you know, I was out there with some of your staff and other volunteers, and it was important that the volunteers and the outreach folks be multilingual, that they be of the various community and could literally and figuratively communicate the importance of the census, of participating in the census, to people who were not aware of what was intended and the $18,000 magic number about being counted.
Right, exactly. I mean, again, it was just making sure that the messengers were people that our community members could identify with, right? So being able to say, oh, look, there's another Vietnamese American telling me that it's important for me to respond to the census. That's a different message than when the Office of Community Partnerships or elected officials, right, send the message. If they can identify with the person and trust the person, then they're more likely to respond and give them their information.
Absolutely. So tell us about some of the challenges in the time of a pandemic. It was harder. We couldn't knock on doors and all that in the same way. Tell us some of the creative workarounds that led you to be so successful.
Yeah, I mean, so like all of us, we really had to pivot from in-person events to all digital and doing everything that we could to get into people's homes, right? The pandemic was challenging for all of us, but it really taught us to be as creative as possible. And it also presented us with an opportunity that we've never had before. I mean, we really had 3 months to get into people's homes. And so we used that as an opportunity to do everything we could to get into people's homes. So we did multilingual mailers with 7 different languages on it. We used social media platforms such as Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp, which is very popular in immigrant communities. We use media outlets in specific languages. So, you know, we had Chinese and Korean newspaper ads. We did social media videos. Our census partners did phone calls and text messages to our community members. So, I mean, anything we could to get into their homes virtually, we did.
That's fantastic. So now the data has been collected. The deadline is in the rearview mirror. Tell folks, if you would, about what happens with the data. And again, going back to White House stunts, there was some conversation about the president wanting to not people who weren't citizens and stuff. Can you share with us what the status of all that is?
Yeah, so there is a pending court case that's going to get heard by the Supreme Court.
Sorry for the eye roll.
Yeah. Okay, completely understand. Yeah. So so the Supreme Court case is trying to exclude undocumented immigrants from the count. Again, this is similar to a stunt that they tried to pull last spring. By signing an executive order to exclude undocumented immigrants. And I mean, the reality is there was no question regarding citizenship on the census. And so even if it was possible, the only way that they could do it is cross-reference data in existing databases, such as trying to pull driver's license data, right? But there really is no database somewhere that says these people are have citizenship, right? And these other people are undocumented. So again, it's just a continuing stunt, and you're going to see a lot of these stunts. We are going to continue to see a lot of these type of stunts over the next couple of months, I believe.
Well, the Supreme Court is going to be so busy trying to undo an election and take away 20 million Americans' health care. Maybe they'll be too busy to also do the census. Who knows?
Right. Exactly. So, you know, the Census Bureau is still supposed to deliver the data to Congress by December the 31st. So those are the 2 next big steps.
Thank you. Let's pivot, Diane, away from the census. The Office of Community Partnerships is one of the coolest government agencies, in my opinion, in Montgomery County. If I remember correctly, it was established first by Ike Leggett and was staffed by former council member Bruce Adams, who did so many exciting and creative things within that office. Why don't you give folks an overview if they're not familiar with the office?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And I was lucky enough to work under Ike's administration and work next door. I was the only liaison who had an office next to Bruce. So lucky me and unlucky for him. But,
Doubt that.
But, I mean, I really learned a lot working under Ike and Bruce. I mean, just phenomenal, creative, welcoming policy thinkers, right?
Right.
And so, you know, our office, the purpose of our office is to build bridges between communities and government, and also to build bridges amongst communities as well. And so there's 3 pieces to the Office of Community Partnerships. We have community liaisons who don't provide direct services, but their main job is to be out in the community, make relationships in the communities so that when there's an important announcement regarding such things as rental assistance, right, we can reach out to our network and say, please help us get the word out.
Right.
So outside of the community liaisons, we have the Gilchrist Immigrant Resource Center, and that's the one-stop shop for newcomers to the county to get information on everything from legal services to computer and English classes. And then third piece is the Volunteer Center, which is the county's one-stop shop for both folks who are looking for volunteer opportunities and for nonprofits who are looking for volunteers.
Fabulous. And that gang, Molly Calloway and her colleagues and stuff, just do great work. I was lucky to work with them when I was helping kick off the Fund for Montgomery, which does important support for our celebration of our diversity. So when people think of diversity, sometimes they think sort of African-American, Asian, Latino, but OCP works so much more broadly than that. So why don't you tell us about some of the other communities that, that you partner with?
Yeah, right. So we, outside of linguistic and country of origin diversity, right? I mean, I'm in Montgomery County. I grew up in this area. It's one of the coolest places to grow up in because of all the different languages,
right,
and country of origins that are represented. We also work with the LGBTQ communities, the youth, seniors, faith communities as well. And so we're really here to build bridges amongst, you know, all communities, not just the typical, you know, when people think of country of origin or language.
Exactly. Now, with the pandemic, how is the office flourishing and how are you doing, again, post-census? How are you engaging with these communities and continuing to lift them up, support them, and connect with them?
Yeah, so I think one of the coolest things about our office is that we've been around for a while, and so therefore we've been able to build these relationships in the community, and we were able to leverage that through the census. And because we were on the ground doing in-person outreach, you know, both virtually and also physically in person, we tied a lot of our COVID outreach and also our voting outreach to the census messaging as well. And so we're going to continue to provide the outreach, particularly around COVID, getting out information on resources such as rental assistance, food security, and any other type of programs, small business support, right? Any type of those programs that come out. We're still going to direct folks who need in-language assistance to the Gilchrist Immigrant Resource Center, because that's a very important resource.
Is that open? Or is that virtually accessible?
It's just virtually, yeah.
Okay.
So there's still.
I was being ever hopeful, you know, that something could function normally, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're hoping eventually to get back to in-person locations, right?
Right.
But yes, so the multilingual phone line is still available, and people can call for referrals to any type of services. And we're still going to work with the volunteer center to leverage volunteers for things like the hubs that are coming up. So we're very, very busy. I don't know if flourishing is the quite word, but we're continuing to be very busy because we're doing all of the multicultural, multilingual outreach.
Right. So before we shift to our Fast Five, tell us, Diane, you immigrated here about 30 years ago from Vietnam. Tell us briefly about your journey and how you ended up in Montgomery County and what's special about being here.
Okay, so the short version of the story is my mom was 9 months pregnant with me in Vietnam, and it was post-war. And so she was one of the boat people who escaped after the war. She was on sea for 10 days, and then they were rescued by a French ship. The doctor told her that if she was not rescued on that day, that we both would have perished at sea. And so she was processed at a refugee camp in Malaysia and then flown to France as a refugee. And it was funny because when she was on the flight, there were two doctors sitting next to her, and she kept praying that she was going to give birth on the plane because at that time, I don't know if it's still true, but at the time, if you gave birth in international airspace, you could choose the country of citizenship for your child. So she wanted to choose America. So she was praying that she would give birth. The doctors were praying that she wouldn't give birth.
Right.
And then we landed in Paris, and then I was born shortly thereafter. And then because we had family already here in the United States, they eventually sponsored my family that came over. And so that's how I grew up. Yes, and so that's how I grew up in this area. Actually, we went to Philadelphia first, so I spent part of my childhood in West Philly, and so I'm an Eagles fan. I bleed green. But we've been in Montgomery County for 30 plus years, and it's one of the coolest, most special places in the entire world to me, and I'm so proud to be a part of this community.
Amen. I'm a Montgomery County native, actually, so K through 12 public schools and came back after college, so all good.
Wow.
All right, so let's pivot to our Fast Five for you, Diane Vu. First off, what is your proudest career or life accomplishment?
You know, for me, it would be finishing college. College was a very just difficult time because I was working and going to school. And in hindsight, I wish I would have taken out more student loans so I could just concentrate solely on school. But yeah, finishing college was probably one of my proudest moments.
Great. How are you staying healthy physically and mentally during COVID?
So I think that is a continuing challenge for a lot of us, right? But I have come to realize over these past few months that, you know, my body is not going to continue to go, and that it's very similar to a car. And if I don't take care of it, it's just going to eventually give out. So I'm trying to stay grounded and sane by having, you know, regular conversations with my family and friends and mentors and other people who are working in this space. To just kind of give me sanity, and I try to unplug as much as possible and not be plugged into the news or social media 24/7, because that can also be very challenging.
Good for you. That sounds great. What is a delicious Vietnamese food that everyone should make sure that they've tried at least once?
Okay, so I think most people know what pho is, right? The noodle soup. People also know what banh mi is, the Vietnamese sandwiches. But my favorite Vietnamese dish is bún bò Huế, which is the spicy beef noodle soup. It's a Hue style soup that has thicker noodles to it. And so the broth itself is like a reddish color, and the noodles are thicker, and it's just this rich, flavorful broth, unlike Vietnamese pho, which is, you know, more mellow. Bún bò Huế is the complete opposite of that.
Nice. So years ago, I read an article that said that every woman should have an anthem, a song that lifts them up and makes them feel inspired and powerful. What would be your anthem, or what is it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, I am a very musical person. I was in band in high school. I was in the marching band at Watkins Mill High School.
Nice.
And so my mind works in music, right? So I'll wake up with a random song that's in my head, or while people are talking, some song will play in my head. So I don't have an anthem. It's just whatever is feeling in my bones at that moment.
Okay, all right. I have to tell you, it's really cool. Think about it and figure out what your anthem is. I have like 4 songs that are my anthems, and they just, when I'm down, when I'm stressed, whenever, I play one of those and blast them, and I'm all good. Last question is the one that I ask everybody. What is your secret hidden talent? What is your superpower that most folks can't do that you're great at?
I don't know if it's a superpower per se, but I love to eat, And so I think people come to me often for recommendations for food, or where to go for food, where to go for certain types of food. I think, again, I wouldn't call it my superpower, because I am really good at eating, which means I got to figure out how to, work out a little bit more. But I would say my knowledge of food and restaurants.
Interesting. Very cool. Well, Diane Vu, it has been a pleasure to kibitz with you today. Thank you for all that you do. And we'll put up your social media, your website and stuff for people who want to find out more about all the terrific community outreach that you are doing at the Office of Community Partnerships. So thanks for all you do. Congratulations on the census. And I look forward to continuing to work together.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all of your support, particularly on the census.
Absolutely. Take care. Stay safe.